All right, so let's just kind of revisit what we were doing last time. So we were practicing writing code to implement kind of different scenarios with loops. And so the first thing that we looked at was a counter-controlled loop, right? And so with our counter-controlled loop example, we had a loop control variable that kept count, basically, right? And so we named it counter. And then the second situation that we looked at, we did a sentinel controlled loop. In that situation, it's an event-based loop. We don't know exactly how many times the loop is going to go through. It's going to continue until they type in the special value, -999. That's the value that we chose as the sentinel. And so our loop control variable here is number, right? But we have the different parts, right? We were talking about, we have our initialization, our test, and our update. But these things look different based on and depending on what type of scenario we're using. Here we still have a sum and a counter, but we need the counter in order to know how many numbers we end up with in our sum, so that if we can calculate the average afterwards, right? So here's your initialization. Get the first number. So enter a number or -999 to quit. We input that. And then while number is not equal to -999, we're going to do stuff. So add the number to the sum, increment the counter, and then our update is to get the next number, right? And then after you do that, so that continues until they type in -999, and then you can calculate the average and output your results. So that's kind of where we ended there. So again, we don't know how many times this is going to go through, right? It's going to continue until they type -999, and that tells it to quit. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and comment that out, and then we're going to do a flag controlled loop. It's going to be kind of similar to this, but it's a little bit different. So I'm just going to go up to the code above it. Put an asterisk forward slash asterisk. And after all that code, I'll put an asterisk forward slash. Okay. So a flag controlled loop is also an event-based loop. But with a flag control loop, usually has some kind of Boolean variable that is kind of controlling the loop. So we'll do an example of that. And I'm going to write this so that it's going to continue, or it's going to be really the same thing. You know, type in numbers, and they get added to a sum, and then we'll calculate the average. But I'm going to make it stop if the user types in a 0. Okay, so it's going to be similar to the sentinel loop, but it's written a little bit differently. So I'm going to say stop if a 0 is entered. Okay. And so I'm going to use a Boolean variable, which is a bool. Bool is the data type, and I'm just going to name this is 0, like that. Okay, is 0. And this is going to be either true or false. With Boolean, we haven't really used Boolean variables very much, but you actually assign a value of true or false, and it actually assigns like a 1 or a 0. But you use the word true or false. So that's going to be our loop control variable there. Okay. And then, just like before, we also need to set up the sum and the counter. So that's what the loop is doing. It's adding stuff up, adding numbers up, and Then we're going to find the average. So we need to initialize our sum to 0 and our counter to 0. Okay. All right, and now let's do the loop. So, so we need to initialize our loop control variable. So I'm just going to set this Boolean variable is 0. I'm going to set it to false. I'm going to initialize it to false. Okay. And so that's how you would write that. Is 0 is equal to false. And then we're going to test while not is 0. That might look a little weird, but that's how you write that. And then open and close curly bracket. So think about it. Is 0 is either going to be true or false, right? So it starts off, we initialize it to false. And so the test is while not false, right? Which is true. Not false is true. So, so it's going to go inside the loop. Okay. And so what do we want to do inside the loop? Well, let's go ahead and get the number. So that would just be, you know, something like cout, enter a number, and then cn number. And we can add the number to the sum. So sum is equal to sum plus number, like that. Increment our counter, just like we did before. I'm just putting some comments here. Increment the counter for averaging. So that just means counter plus plus. But then how do we get out of this? How do we get out of this loop? What's our update? Well, we said that if the user types in a 0, we want that to trip the flag and switch the state of the flag. So we need to test for that. So we can throw an if statement in there. If number is equal to 0. Okay. So if number is equal to 0, then we want is 0 to now be true. So if number is equal to 0, is 0 is equal to true. So there's your update. So it's similar to the Sentinel controlled loop, right? You know, we might even want to ask or tell our user how to end it. You know, enter a number or a 0 to quit or something like that. But that's an example of a flag controlled loop. And then after the loop is over with, then we can go ahead and find the average and output our results. We actually have all the statements in the previous one, right? So we can just copy and paste those again. Calculate average and output the results. That's going to be exactly the same. So divide the sum by the counter. You can do some typecasting on there to make sure it does floating point division, and then output the results, the sum and the average. So let's see that in action. So enter a number. So we just keep typing in numbers. Oops, I messed it up, didn't I? That's interesting. So it went into input failure mode, actually. I type in a 0, and that trips the flag. I haven't done set precision on any of these things. So, that might be a good idea to go back and do. But right now I'm just focused mainly on the loop setup. So how'd that go? Y'all get that? Mm-hmm. Hey, I think this is still going, isn't it? I think I spotted a logic error here. Anybody else notice that? No. No, I'm getting, I think my counter is ending up being one too many. And I hadn't really tested that, but I noticed that if I just, type in one number, for example, and then type in the 0 for the second one, it's dividing by 2 and not by 1. Or if I do, like 100, 100, and then 0 to quit. Yeah, it's dividing by 1 more than it should. So that probably has to do with the order I have things in here. So it's getting the number. So what happens when I actually want to stop and I type in that 0? Well, it's going through here and it picks up the 0 and it's adding it to the number. You're then incrementing the counter before it actually does this, right? So how could we fix that? Because that's not right. We could put it up there, but it's still going to go through. We could use a break statement to break out of the loop, but that kind of defeats the purpose of the if and the flag setup. So I'm wondering if my example might not be the best example in the world. Or you could do this. We could structure it like this. If number is equal to 0, we could test right off the bat. We can get the number, and then if number is equal to 0, set the flag. But if it's not equal to 0, do the calculations. Like take this, and add it to the sum like that. And again, if you only have one statement inside an if or an else, you don't have to have curly brackets, but you can always put them. I think this might improve the readability of this one. That there. Let's test that out. So, does everybody see what I'm doing there? So I'm going to check it. So get the number. I don't want to add the number and update the counter if it's a 0. Okay? So I can check it. I can get the number and then check it. If number is equal to 0, go ahead and trip the flag, change my flag variable, and it won't add to the sum or the counter. But if that's false, then I can go ahead and add the number to the sum and update the counter. How's that? So let's test that. do a 0, and there you go. My sum is 200, my average is 100. So it's not including the 0. Yeah, that works. So that was a logic error, right? It compiled. I didn't break any rules, any syntax rules or anything like that. But I had a flaw in my logic. All right, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, so there was one other popular or common scenario for loops, and that was that's an end of file loop. Okay, and in fact, that's what you have to do on your Program 2 assignment, right? So does everybody have this? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to comment this out as well. So the idea here is that you have an end of file loop example. We're going to read numbers in from a file, and we're just going to keep reading numbers until we reach the end of the file. So this means that we have to have an input file that we've created. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So in Dev C++, it's easy. You just go to File and New Source File. Okay, and I'm trying to remember in code blocks. I think we can go if you're using code blocks, go to File and New Empty File. That's the best way to do it. Instead of going to File and New File, go to New Empty File if you're using code blocks. Okay, and it will ask you, do you want to add this new file to the active project? You would think it would be yes, but you need to say no, because it's just a text file. Okay, so I'm going to say no. And again, this is for code blocks.
So it's go to new and then.
Yeah, so if you're using Dev, just go to File and New Source File. File and New, and then choose Source File. And so I'm just going to type in some numbers here. We're just going to put it same type of thing that we were just doing. I'll put 10 numbers. And I'm going to leave my cursor there at the end, not on a separate line, but just there after the last number. Okay, and then I'm going to save that. And I'm going to make sure that I put this in the same folder as my source code file. So this is in loop demo and main. And I'm going to name this. And also, I don't know if it matters if you change the file type here. It's just not a... Anyway, I'll just leave that for now. But I like to type my file names inside of double quotes. That's something I learned a while back, just in case the program wants to add a file extension onto the end by default or something. So I'm going to put it inside of double quotes. I'll just name this something like number underscore input. So again, make sure that you don't put, so number underscore input dot txt. And I'll put that in double quotes. Make sure you don't have any spaces in your file names. All right. And that's even more important on Macs. So number underscore input dot txt, that's going to be my input file. And then I'm going to go back up here to my main program and we'll write some code. So remember what we have to do to use files? we have to declare our files. And so the data type is ifstream for input file. Then you have to give it a name, a valid identifier name. So something like infile. And then let's go ahead and use an output file to output our results since we're dealing with files here. We could easily just output to the screen using cout, but we can do it this way as well. ofstream out file, I'll name it. So that declares your files, and then the next step is to open your files. And this is where you actually specify the actual file name. So so you say infile.open, and then inside of parentheses and double quotes, the actual file name. So number_input.txt, like that. And then a semicolon at the end. And the same thing, outfile.open. I'm just going to name my output file something like number_output.txt. So, and this should work. This should work here on this Windows machine as long as my number input.txt is in the same folder as my source code file. Now we found with Macs you have to, it wanted a full path name, right? So my Mac users in here, y'all remember how to do that? So have to use full path name. So it's something like infile.open, and then what was it? It's forward slash is right. What was it? Is it like users? Slash users, lowercase, is it all lowercase? Oh, uppercase. Users like that. Slash. So whatever your name is, username. And so if you have things in documents, it might be like that. And then maybe another folder if you've got a project folder or something like that. And then maybe the file name. So it might be something like that. It depends on, things like your username and where you have it stored and so forth. But it'd be something like that for the Mac users. That's what's nice about the Windows. As long as you have it in the same folder, you're good. You can always specify the full path name even in Windows, but in Windows it looks something like that. It's a little different. It's probably something like file.open. Maybe if it's like on your C drive, C:, and I think you use backslashes in Windows. That makes it even more confusing. And then like wherever you have it stored, like oh, there it is down at the bottom. Something like users, and then I think you use 2 backslashes like an escape sequence thing. Or whatever it is, documents, and so forth. That's not really where it is, but so you can do something like that even in Windows. Anyway. All right, so we declared our files and then opened our files. we might even want to test to see if the file opened correctly. You remember how to do that? We can throw an if statement in here if we want to. If not, in file, or whatever you named your input file, do something like cout could not open input file. And then you can throw in a return 0 just to end the program. So that'll let you know right off the bat if your input file got opened correctly. And if it didn't, then something's up with it, right? So if it didn't open correctly, if you get that error message, then maybe your file name isn't correct, or it doesn't match up with the actual file name, or maybe the folders, maybe it's not in the right folder, or you don't have your, if you're putting a full path name, maybe you don't have the path correct. So I didn't get the error message, so it must have opened it correctly. But maybe I typed in my name wrong, number input. So then I would get the error message, could not open input file. So that's a good way to test it. All right. All right, but we're doing loops, so let's get back to what we're dealing with here. So we declared our files, opened our files. Now let's do our loop stuff. So I still need to set up my sum and my counter, just like we did before. So sum is equal to 0, counter is equal to 0, like that. Okay. And then we need to initialize the state of our loop. So the way that we do that with the end of file loop is similar to how we did it with the Sentinel and the flag controlled. No, it'd be more like the Sentinel controlled loop. Get the first value. Get the first value. So that just looks like this. In file, and we're going to read into number, right? So get the first number. Sometimes we call this the priming read. We're going to get that first number, or the first value, before we even test our loop. And since it's an input file, we don't have to ask the user to type something in, right? We just get it. So there's your initialization. Then we're going to test. And so this is easy. We just say while in file. That's how we do that. There's a few other ways that you can do it. You could say that's the easiest way. What I just did. You could also do something like while not in file dot eof open and close parentheses, like that. That's a function that will check to see if you've reached the end of file marker. But that's more to type. I think it's easier just to type while in file. And they do the same thing. So what do we want to do? Well, let's do what we need to do with that number, right? So add the number to the sum. So just like we did before, sum is equal to sum plus the number. And then increment our counter. So counter plus plus. And then we're going to update. And so the update looks just like the initialization. We're just going to get the next number. So we just say in file into number. Like that. And that's all there is to it. So it's just going to keep reading numbers in until I reach the end of the file. And then after the loop is finished, Then we can do our averaging and our outputting. So do I still have that on my... Yeah. Oh no, I don't. Thought maybe I still had it on the clipboard. So calculate the average and then output the results. If you want to output to your file instead of to the output screen, you can change that C out to your output file name. Was it out file? That's what we named it. Oh yeah, and then don't forget to close your files. I always forget to do that. We say infile.close that and outfile.close. And what's cool about this is you don't have to type anything. You've already typed the values in. So just run it, and then to see your results, I'm going to go up to File and Open, and there's that output file right there, circle output. No, that's not it. We're not doing the circle program. Where was it? Open. I'm in a different folder. Loop demo, that's what I am. Number output. There you go. The sum is 833 and the average is 83.3. I had 10 numbers in there, right? Yep. All right, so get that going. And if you get, let me know if you need some help or anything. I think I'm going to go ahead and stop this. So that's how you do different types of loops.